Hi everybody, I'm Jim Johnstone. Today we're going to review the Renogy 200 watt suitcase solar panel system. It's the RNG Kit STCS 200D. I chose Renogy after studying all of the reviews, camping in my Airstream Flying Cloud. Last year I went to a beautiful campground near Mount Rainier in Washington State. There were no hookups, so we had to rely on the Airstream's two 12-volt batteries for all of our electrical power. No problem for a single night, but the next two nights we were in Washington State Park, again with no power. By the end of the second night, our batteries were below 12 volts, and we went into extreme energy conservation mode, and I mean extreme. The only two things that we allowed to consume electricity were our water pump and the refrigerator. That's when I decided maybe it was time to invest in a portable solar power system. Why solar? It's lighter weight than my 2400 watt generator, and it is quiet. Why portable? I wanted to try solar before I committed fully to it. I figured if I didn't like it, I could easily sell it. In 2014, this Airstream came with two standard Interstate Group 24 deep discharge batteries. They probably have about 60 ampere hours apiece. So with two of them in parallel, I've got maybe 120 ampere hours. After doing some analysis, I decided I needed to have 200 watts of solar power, which during a day might generate 1,500 to 2,000 watts of energy in bright sunshine to charge my batteries. Renogy seemed to have a very good product with good customer service. Their price was right, and so they were my choice. Now let's take the Renogy out of its suitcase. The suitcase has a zipper on each side, which you can unzip. And I found the easiest way to get it out of the suitcase is just let the suitcase fall away on each side, and then it's a short lift. Next, flip up these two clips, one on either side. And we'll rotate the Renogy up into its edge position, unfold the panels. Next we'll loosen up the braces. And now we can fold this down to the ground. Renogy comes with a 20 amp pulse width modulated solar charge controller. It's on a hinge, so it can move up and down depending on what angle you've propped your legs at. It comes complete with MC4 type solar connectors that go into the charge controller, and then coming out of the charge controller another pair of MC4 connectors, color-coded, red and black, that allow you to connect to your battery. The Renogy is set up with two legs that you can use to prop up to the correct angle. You want to get your solar panel aligned to be pointing more or less directly at the sun. You have a single knob here that you tighten to hold the panel in place. There's one of these on either side. The frame of the Renogy is about a 1-inch wide black aluminum. It has the corner guards here and here, so all four corners are protected. It keeps you from digging those sharp corners into something while you're loading or unloading your Renogy. Cables look to be about 12 gauge cables here on the panel itself. The solar controller has a couple of buttons where you can select the type of battery that you have. It'll do 6 different battery types: lithium, flooded lead acid, absorbed glass mat type batteries, and you can also select whether you want to look at amps, volts, or ampere hours on your gauge, and there's an LCD display here. Now Renogy tells you to hook the battery up to the charge controller first, and then hook the charge controller up to the solar panels. So I've left one of the connections to the solar panel unhooked to remind me to always hook up the battery first. Renogy supplies you a set of cables to connect to your battery. They look like this. Comes in a nice plastic bag. You have the alligator clips, and again, this appears to be maybe a 12 or 14 gauge type wire. A pair of them connect directly into your MC4 type connectors, and then alligator clip on to the battery. This is not really the way I wanted to go, and even though it was a nice thought of Renogy to include that, I wanted something a little bit more substantial. So I went online and I found this pair of Bouge cables. It's 10 gauge, and I got a 30-foot set of these for around 40 bucks. They come complete with the MC4 connectors. The connector is already applied to one end. You put it on the other end using the proper crimping tool and your wire strippers. And then what I did was I also bought MC4 to SAE type adapter, also 10 gauge. I'm going to plug this adapter directly into my battery box where I've put in a bulkhead SAE type adapter. I have an SAE connector on my stock Airstream battery box. I did modify the battery box to add that connector. It cost about $5 or $6. You can get it on eBay. And then I had to buy another adapter, which you can see here connects to my positive and negative cables using the same kind of Renogy solar connector found on that extension cable. Now that we've got the battery connected, you can see my battery voltage is 12.9 volts. I don't have my solar cell hooked up yet. You can see it's still open connection here. So I just wanted to show you it has a very nice backlit display. By selecting the lower button, I can choose the type of battery that I'm using, and by upper button I can select whether I'm going to get volts, amps, or ampere hours. I'll leave it on volts for the time being. Next I'm going to connect my solar cell. My solar cell is now connected into the battery charge controller. Alright, now we've got the Renogy pointed pretty much directly at the sun. You can tell it's pointed pretty much directly because the shadow of the solar cell is right along the edge of the solar cell, and it's pretty much in parallel to that. If I move it to one side or the other, you can see the shadow will move to the side a little bit. Alright, we're out here in the sun. My battery is pretty fully charged now. You can see by the bar graph across the top, it's somewhere between 3/4 and full charge. And I'm pulling about 1.7 amps out of the Renogy panel here in the bright sun. Now if my battery was less charged, I could get up to the full 20 amps when this controller goes into the bulk charge mode. Check the battery voltage now. The battery is being charged at 14.7 volts. Now one of the things you may not know about the solar panels and these pulse width modulated controllers is they do draw what's called a quiescent current. That means even when it's dark and they're not putting out any current, they're sucking current out of your battery. In this case, the Renogy demands milliamps of power from the battery. That's not very much considering during the day you can get up to 20 amps back out of it. So will I leave mine plugged in overnight? Probably. I'm not going to be worried about a few milliamp hours of loss during the evening that I'm going to regain in the first hour of sunlight during the day. The day I got these panels, it was raining and overcast, and I thought, what the heck, I'll hook them up to my battery and just see how I could do. My battery was sitting at about 12.4 volts, and I was getting about a half amp out of the solar panels. And in about 2 days of that rain cloud situation, my battery was up to full charge and was just on maintenance mode from the solar panels and the charge controller. A couple other things I like. I mentioned the lightweight and the portability. You can move these panels around. If you put panels on the roof of your camper, wherever you park your camper, that's the exposure to the sun that you're going to get. With these panels and long cables that I have, I can move this anywhere within 30 feet of that battery box to get the kind of exposure to the sun that I want. And what I'm going to do is during the morning, I'm going to point it a little bit more to the east, about say 45 degrees to the east, and in the afternoon I'll tilt it back around to 45 degrees to the west, and I'll maximize my sun exposure throughout the day without having to move my panels every hour or so. Cost of this system overall, I'm in at about $430, so I went a little bit over my budget of $2 per watt. The Renogy Suitcase system weighs in at about 35 pounds without the extension cables. That might add a couple of more pounds. Its dimension in the suitcase are 36 inches by 26 inches by 3.1 inches. So that's when it's all folded up and inside the suitcase. I store this in the back of my camper, and I'll show you that next. I built this shelf to go in the back of my camper, and I allowed about 4 inches between the bottom of the bed, this is going underneath the queen bed that's in the back of the camper, and the bottom of the shelf. And that gives me just enough room to slide my Renogy suitcase into the back of the camper, and that's where I'm going to carry it. I put a little notch in the shelf over on the right hand side so that I can get a milk crate in there, which I use to store other odds and ends and keep them from rattling around. I hope you found this video useful and recommend it to your friends. In the future, I'll let you know how the system works in the campground.